This is 11 honors, and we are reviewing the exam review sheet. You have a question?
Am I even any more gummy bears?
Yes, it's already there.
Westchester Country Day
Do
School.
do you have any of these that you particularly need to go over? Yeah.
Can I have the sheet?
Yeah, right. You don't care where we start.
The poems. The poems.
All right,
No, I don't wanna start there, Robbie.
we'll start with both.
The first.
All right, so look at number 13, and then 16 and 17. I only need 16, and I don't think we're gonna get to my last Duchess meeting. Now, we're gonna get to Ulysses, so I don't think we need 17, we need 16 questions, because there's 16 on this. So let's look at Charge of Light Brigade, and then I'll have to give you Ulysses, but, Charge of Light Brigade we did just the other day. First of all, we have to think about what is this period like, and we read a whole book about it, or 2 books about it. So if you looked at, that'd be a great question, by the way, if you only read, Heart of Darkness, that was the only book you read, that's written in the Victorian period, what conclusions can you draw about the Victorian period? There's one big word that starts with the letter I that would,
Imperialism.
right, so that would be a book that reveals imperialism, and so imperialism is a big part of the Victorian period. It's called Victorian because she was queen, until the current queen, just a couple years ago, passed her. Victoria had been queen longer than any other monarch in British history. Now the current queen, at 69 years, she became queen in 1952. And she doesn't look like she's any close to dying. But anyway, that's one characteristic, world conquest. The British Empire really ruled the world during that period. The other one, if you only read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, what would be a characteristic of the Victorian period? It would be hypocrisy. So you just take those 2 issues alone, they tell you something about the Victorian period. That'd be a great question. What does each of those books tell us about each of those particular points? Let's look at Charge of Light Brigade. We spent some time going over it. Remember Tennyson, there are several things you need to remember about. Guys, y'all wanna?
Tennyson?
Thank you.
Is that the author of
Yeah.
Charge of Light Brigade?
Number 16. All right, so Charge of Light Brigade Tennyson, there's several things I ask you to remember about him. You got, look at your notes. Find them. We took notes on a PowerPoint. I'll wait for you.
I remember all these, and we had that pass on it.
We're not gonna do all of them, we're just gonna do it.
Some of them.
So can
Okay.
anybody tell me characteristics of Tennyson? And I'll wait for you to find the answers, because you have them somewhere in your.
Are we doing the Eagle? Yeah.
Just the ones that are. So I need an answer.
even looking at
Victoria, yeah.
His poetry was like about imagination.
All right. Keep going.
He used vivid descriptions.
All right. Keep going.
And it matched like sound and tense.
Yes, all those are true. All right, so let me add to that list, it's already on the list, but I'll point out a couple of things. He loved the elevated, lofty subject. He didn't talk about, mundane, everyday things. He liked subjects like courage and that sort of thing. And he liked to write about the past. He kind of romanticized the past. He liked heroes. And so when you look at Charge of Light Brigade, you got all of that here. Now, Charge of Light Brigade was contemporary with Tennyson. It happened during his life. It wasn't like it's the past. But it was about a lofty subject, men giving their lives in war for others. The other one is Ulysses, well, I'll just have to get to you in a minute or so. So we'll work around that, see how, that's not enough to write about, just that one thing, so we'll come back to that, but I just wanted to tell you, charge of life brigade, remember some of the issues, it was about the duty of a soldier to do and die, not for a reason why. It was about, facing death with courage. It was about world conquest, what the British doing in the Crimean Peninsula. And that's because they wanted to have influence in that area of the world. All right, so those are just some things right there. We'll come back to that later when you look at Ulysses. Look at 13. I've got a couple of poems in there.
White Man's Burden.
What is the book, Heart of Darkness, say about imperialism? I'm grading your test, I will have them at least by Friday, graded 2 today. Thing lasted a little bit longer than I had hoped, so I worked this afternoon, but one of the questions was, and so far so good, in the ones I've looked at, but what does the book say about imperialism? Yeah.
Well, I think an example in the book was, whenever they're in Africa, you can see how imperialism affected it in a negative way.
Well,
How?
Well, like at the central station with the,
Hey guys, make sure you're masked, Robbie.
like at the central station with all those big holes in the ground and the machines that were not kept well.
Well, there's so, and I remember your test, because I looked at yours, you had a lot more details than that, you
Yeah.
need to review that. But that whole scene was an example of showing how bad imperialism was for Africa. Because it was just chaotic, that wasn't so much bad for Africa, but look what they were doing to the land, they were exploding mountains and creating holes, they were enslaving the population.
I mean, I think.
There were
it's
some
like-
of them that weren't worked to death, were dying from illnesses. There were other reasons, I mean, you look at Kurtz, you could talk about how, and Kurtz was ruined by Africa, imperialism ruined Kurtz. He went in there, and this is where White Man's Burden comes in. At the beginning of the book, he was all about the white man's burden. Explain that poem to me. It's the white man that is European, including America. What burden did the author think we had to bear? Now, I'm not gonna answer them all for you.
Because we have to help them.
Do what? Yeah,
They're gonna hate us or trying to realize them, and we also.
trying to do what to them?
Trying to modernize.
Yeah, good word. Civilize, modernize, and they would hate us for it. But that was the burden. The burden was Europeans were like almost, he didn't mention God in there, but I think it was almost like a God-given mandate to civilize the world. And particularly these groups of people that, weren't living up to 19th century technology. And we would be hated for it. What else would be the burden? Like, what would be some of the other issues about it? Well, look at Kurtz. He had to go to a place that it could kill you because malaria is all around, so you could die. It's a long way from home. Families would be sending their kids, their boys, to die in these countries because this was our duty, this was our job to change the lives of these people. That was White Man's Burden, and that was Kurtz. Remember Kurtz, when he went into Africa, he wanted to do that. And he was a great guy, he was smart. What are the qualities? What qualities can you remember about Kurtz? The good qualities. Jeff, what are the good qualities of Kurtz?
He had a really strong voice, he was a natural leader.
Hard worker.
Yeah, he's a really hard worker, everybody looked up to him as like a,
What sort of talents did he have? You mentioned leader, right?
yeah, leader,
What leadership qualities was he pretty strong with?
he was good at managing all kinds of systems or whatever jobs that had to
He
be
was
done.
smart. But what was the one quality that Marlowe
Work.
said was his, wasn't his work?
His work
I think
ethic.
we'll just naturally look up to him.
Because of this quality.
Kinda like his adventure, like how he just went out and his voice.
He did those things, but that wasn't the quality. Say it again.
His voice,
What do you mean?
like he had a voice that just made everybody wanna listen to him.
And so, the story really focuses on the power in controlling people for good or bad is through the voice. The voice is really the most powerful weapon human beings have because of the ideas that come through the voice and the power of the voice to command. And he had this great voice. So that was one of the qualities he had, and he wanted to civilize Africa. What changed him? And this is part of the question.
Imperialism.
What changed, what is it about imperialism that changed him? He goes in there and in fact, he writes this article about the power of this movement to civilize these people. But what was the last words of it? 3 words. He wrote, he had typed it out, and Kurt got a copy of it, but he wrote in 3 words at the end in his, like in handwriting, like he just added as a postscript. You don't remember what it was?
Mm-mm.
Well, it's the opposite of what the article said. So he's going in to civilize them, but when it was all over, what conclusion did he draw? Come to.
The unsymbol.
Tell me what it is, even if you remember exact words, what did he, at the end of his experience there, want to do to these people?
Kill them.
Kill them.
Exterminate them, even.
Good.
That's the word he used. Not just kill a few of them, but exterminate them.
Was
like
it
all
all
of them.
over ivory?
Well, that's what changed him. And
Yeah.
it's not so much ivory, there's nothing good or bad about ivory, but what did it represent? What was it able to do for someone? Why was anybody interested in ivory?
Cause it was valuable.
It was valuable, they could sell it, the world could make things, trinkets out of it. And so he found that he was really good at, like you said, leadership qualities, people looked up to him. His physical attributes weren't so bad either. What would you say about his physical
Good
attributes?
looking.
He's tall.
He's tall, he's 7 feet tall, so he was this huge man with a huge voice. He's
Huge
got
body.
natural leadership qualities, and he was able to do anything he wanted to. What's the evidence that he was able to do anything he wanted to? How do we know that?
He basically went through Africa killing anybody he wanted to.
Well, why did he do that?
And-
There was a reason why he
And
killed
all
people.
of them, all the natives respected him and treated him like a god.
But why was he killing people? It wasn't indiscriminate. He had a reason. I mean, he didn't kill you.
Cause they were freakos.
Cause they were in the way of his, work.
Which is what?
Getting the ivory.
Alright, so anything that got in his way, he was willing to exterminate. And so, and one other way, how did Africa change him? Not only did he become a god, really worshipped by these people, and he killed for it, they crawled in his presence, he had a magnificent girlfriend, I mean, he had everything, but what's wrong with him? There's something we realize is wrong with him.
He's sick.
Oh,
Well, how
yeah.
does he show that?
Malaria.
Skinnier.
Well,
Skinnier.
he probably did have malaria.
He gets skinnier.
Well, that was because he was physically sick.
He got Asian.
What?
He's a freak out.
Yes, and remember, Marlowe realizes that he worships something. And he ends up, remember, he sees him at the very end, crawling to the darkness. And so he worships the darkness.
That's the heart.
And so even Kurtz comes out of there, succumbing to the darkness. The darkness defeats him. And so you could say that the whole book is about the triumph of darkness. And it even changes Marlowe. So the question is, what does imperialism do to the Europeans? That's one thing. Kurtz is the perfect example. It ruined his character. And he began to do evil things. And one reason is because there was nobody to change his mind. Payne, you can take that right outside that door, and you can, maybe the lockers will laugh at you, I don't know, you won't have anybody, you won't have an audience, but you're either not gonna open your mouth, you're gonna sit there and work, you got that choice, right? Alright, good, now we understand each other. White man's burden, we checked that off the list. Recessional, we did talk about that. What does that have to do with imperialism? We did do that. That's not something we have to go back. You remember, look at it, find it. Recessional. The word is what the poem is about. I mean, it's perfect, just like White Man's Burden that captures completely the poem. So you mean anything about recessional? Find it. It's in your notes somewhere. You got a copy of it. I'll wait for you. Yes. Yeah. Anybody got recessional yet? We'll come back to that. Yeah, I don't need to tell you something that you have right there in front of you. You can find that. I promise you there's gonna be a question on there like that. It's gonna be an oral question Monday, I believe it is. Yeah, it's Monday. That asks you to discuss how imperialism changes Africa and Africans and how it changed Kurds and Europeans. We've already talked about 15, that's kind of overlap with each other. Let's go back to the, I've got these checked off for some reason. Red badge, we do red badge? I got them all checked, I don't remember doing it.
We did that though.
I look at Dickinson and Whitman. I hesitate putting it on there, but I must. I think it's important that we did it. So, look at your notes. You see anything about Emily Dickinson? These are really easy to do. It's harder to do Tennyson. We didn't spend a lot of time on them. But Dickinson and Whitman are fairly easy to do. So what do we know about, which one do you tell us?
Dickinson,
That's a good place to start. What do you know?
she was a romantic. Was like,
I won't argue with you yet. It's
um,
usually not what people call her, but there's a reason. I think you could say that.
she uses like nature and like religion in her poetry.
She does. That she kind of defies labeling. That's why I said that. What's the one personal thing about her that really does help define the kind of poetry she writes? Like one personal thing about her. What is she kind of famous for? We emphasize. Yeah.
She wrote a lot about death, but not in a way that would make you fear it, but more in a way that it was more a beautiful act of nature.
Yes.
She was a good observer.
Right, she does write about death. What I was gonna say about the one thing we know about her, she was a recluse.
So,
Remember, she stayed at home. She didn't leave her house for years. She wasn't always that way. Something changed her, nobody knows why. But she ends up living at home and even avoiding guests in the house. The family was really well known. She was a nut. I mean, the people in the house were unusual. And she was also unusual for that reason. A genius. So that, if you can remember that about her, she's the one that stayed upstairs when people came to visit and would drop notes through the stairwell. She was too afraid to come down and talk to people face to face. I don't know why she didn't do it. That's the assumption you can make. But what we said, how does that influence her poetry? she talks about death and life, but she also, the things in her poetry are little things, are domestic things,
She's
are
good at-
things that around the yard, around the house. She didn't write about wars, she didn't write about, political events or anything like that. All her images, when you mention nature, are literally outdoors, behind her house or in the house. The job, so she talks about folding clothes and compares it to the passage of time. She talks about a snake, in the backyard, remember, and it reminds you of Satan, the snake in the garden. She does talk a lot about death. And you're right, it's the subtle aspects of death. We need to pick a poem or two. So I'm gonna name a couple of poems that you need to be able to access. And those poems were, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, and then you add Narrow Fell in the Grass, that was one about the snake. Those poems illustrate so far the things that we've talked about. Do you remember anything about Because I Could Not Stop for Death? Yeah.
It started off something like, because I could not stop for death, it stopped for me.
Yeah.
Something like that, and it's all about like, the lady, like, death, like, just taking her through things that are happening on the planet and stuff, right, just to like see things. It was weird because it described like death as an actual person, and it described it in a really like time way.
Because what was it about? There was something that surprised her, scared her. I'm not even sure it scared her, but it surprised her. What was that? What, in that poem, what was the thing about death that surprised her?
It was so slow and endless.
Did you say slow and endless?
Yeah, it like goes on forever.
Right. When she realized, it's gonna be like this forever, that's when she realized death was kind, yes, death was gentle. That wasn't so much the problem. That was when she realized, wow, this is gonna be like this forever. It doesn't say it's good, doesn't say it's bad, it's just that aspect of death. You remember I heard a fly buzz when I died?
I do.
Okay,
Okay.
you tell me.
Nice. So like, it was kind of like, hitting on like how when she died, you're not really focused on, like, you can notice the small things. You're not like, you're in I guess a different mindset than you normally would be, and that's what, I guess,
Well,
she,
You're right. But we gotta identify what it is that she focused on, and what does it mean, yeah.
That death is inevitable.
Yeah, but go back to what he said.
It's not gonna wait for you.
It's what?
It's not gonna wait for you.
Yeah, but in this poem, what he's talking about is when she died, it surprised her that, did you hear what the name of the poem is? I heard a fly buzz when I died. That's the little thing that distracted her. But what was it she expecting to see?
Like,
Yes.
Something.
And yes, according to her, she didn't see. And so that kind of gives you a chill when you realize the last thing I remember is the fly, not seeing the king. What does that tell you about her, maybe her religious faith? Because when she wrote the poem, she was very much alive. But what does that tell you about her religious faith?
Must have not been a Christian.
Right. She doubted it, which is not unusual for young people, even Christians sometimes they do that. So that's not unusual, but that's what the poem was about. So those are typical of the kinds of things she wrote about. Now, if you get that question, and if I put it on the test, that's what I would expect you to say about it. Oh, you can also say her poems are short. They use kind of free verse usually. She liked to use near rhyme, slant rhyme. Her words don't actually rhyme. They sort of rhyme. And she does that on purpose. And so those couple of things, the topics, the subject matter, the lack of rhyme or conventional rhyme, and sort of the free verse, just kind of a different style. What about Walt Whitman? Yeah,
He incorporates transcendentalism and realism. He's the father of free verse. He uses catalogs and lists people, places, items, and events. He used simple language and complex ideas. He was a Civil War poet, and when he died, he was considered a great poet.
great list, I'm impressed. You just gotta memorize it. But that list is great, but that's not gonna be enough. I want you to be able to show me, and, because I didn't ask you this, I'm impressed with that. What was the, give me a name of a poem that you wrote.
Oh. Leaves of Grass.
Yeah, that was the name of all the poems. I mean,
It's a
that was a
controversial
collection of poems. That was the name of the book.
It's kinda like controversial, it was a collection of.
It was?
Let's leave it like this.
So I need some titles. You gotta illustrate that.
America Singing.
All right, I hear America Sing. How does that,
Song of Myself.
we didn't read that, but that is one of his poems.
We didn't read that. Oh, Captain, not
Yeah.
Captain.
That is the other one we read. We read about
You're really smart, you did.
6 of them. But, Captain, My Captain, I hear America Singing, Cavalry Crossing a Ford, and Astronomer, When I Heard the Learned
Captain, My
Astronomer.
Captain.
Those were the 4.
Good, man.
All right, how do those poems illustrate his style? You said he used catalogs. He liked to write about America. He liked to write kind of in an epic style, yeah.
He was experimental and uncompromising.
All right, well, let's take one of those poems and show that. Can you see anything in any of those poems that illustrate what we've already said about it? Like list, which poem, I hear America Singing, he uses lists. You know, the carpenter singing, the boatwright singing, the, whatever, I can't remember all the carpenter singing. What was his point when he uses lists? What is the effect of lists? I told you earlier, he wanted to write write in an epic style, and epic poems use lists. Why are lists affect, how are lists affect?
Like repetition or like.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, but what, do you remember what we said about that? We said that the reason lists are effective in an epic poem because they suggest size, or, large size, or volume, or vastness. And epic, that's what epics mean. They mean it's big, it's a big story, it's a big place. And so when you make lists, it conveys that attitude. And so his list about I Hear America Singing, he wrote about 10 or 12 different jobs to suggest what about America, why is America singing?
It's, cause they like their job,
One more time.
cause they like their jobs.
So they sing because they like it. Very good. What else? What kind of jobs were they?
They're just like regular jobs and not white collar.
Right, they're hands-on jobs, builders and fixers and things, that kind of thing. What's the, they sing because they like it. It's hands-on work. And one other thing, they're all different jobs, which speaks about the diversity of America. Like we have lots of different jobs to do. It's not, one's not more important than the other. All right, so those are things you can say about that poem. How about, Oh Captain, My Captain, remember that one?
About Abraham Lincoln.
Right, and what was he saying about Lincoln? Of course, he's dead, but what was the purpose of the
Wasn't
poem?
it like a celebration of the end of the Civil War?
And of his life,
Yeah.
and of his leading it. So it was mourning the death of the captain, which was the president, but it was also praising him and celebrating the war. And remember, the long lines were about, the poem was long, short lines. Long lines, short lines, it had like 3 stanzas. The long lines celebrated victory, the short lines mourn the death of Lincoln. And this poem was not free verse, it was rhymed, and it was metered, it had a meter to it. How about one more? The Learned Astronomer.
Oh, is that the one where he's sitting in class and then he leaves because he wants to learn, like, outside of the classroom? No,
That's right.
is that the one that describes, like, it's better to learn, like, outside of the classroom and from real life experiences? instead of,
Right.
Like, being taught.
Yeah, like out in the forest, all that kind of stuff.
So that was the point of it. If you're gonna study stars or
You
anything,
should go look at it.
you can, but there are two ways to, you can learn it inside the classroom, you can learn it from books. That's a legitimate way to learn, what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But he went for the hands-on
Anybody
experience.
get away from me.
And since we're on the subject, the last poem would be Cavalry Crossing the Ford. Do you remember what that was about? Cavalry Crossing the Ford,
This is about the cavalry crossing.
which is what?
A boat.
What's cavalry?
Horses.
All right, so these are troops, they're not just anybody, it's military. Do you remember how the poem worked? They were single file going across the river. So at the beginning of the poem, they come out of the woods. And at the other end of the poem, they go back in the woods, and it's a long line of coming out of the woods, crossing the river. What is a ford?
A river.
Waterway.
The shallow part of the river that allows you to cross, you don't have to swim. So what was that poem really talking about?
Perseverance.
Good try though.
What was it talking about? It was talking about they were lounging, I don't know if that was a word, but of their horses. They were, you know, the colors of the water, the colors of the sun, the colors of their equipment shining. It's about war, but what was it not about war?
It's not about the violence of war. It's
That's
not
right.
about, like, the calm.
That's right, even in war, there are moments of beauty. And this was like a beautiful scene with all these guys with the equipment on, with the bridles of the horses and, maybe swords, sabers, all blending in the sun, and yet they were coming from battle and going to battle where they would kill people. But even in war, there are moments of beauty, yeah.
Was this the one that focused on, in the poem where like some people had already crossed the ford and were entering the woods?
Yeah.
And other people were still in the other
Right.
part of the woods?
You only see the middle part of this story, the part that they're at peace and are calm and so forth, yeah.
What was this poem called?
Cavalry crossing.
Cavalry Crossing the Ford. So you get, let's see, one of the poems is two poems about the Civil War. One poem is about kind of just America and the working in America. And the other poem is about kind of a lifestyle of learning, you know, hands-on learning, not book learning. He was a romantic. We said that about Emily. She's not really, but you could say that about him. And he loved lists, and he popularized free verse, and he liked writing about the Civil War and about ordinary people. You're asked you're gonna be asked to speak for 3 minutes. And, what?
How long we have to write?
About, I think 7 to 10, I think we even said 10. So you get 10 minutes maybe to get a 3x5 card, not a big one, but a smaller one.
We could get two history and none of the ones in here.
You might get 2 history, you might get one of each.
I don't like how they're doing that, sir.
Well, I'll tell them.
Let's suck it up.
I agree with that. Really big.
All right, so that's Emily Dickinson, that's Walt Whitman. We got 10, no, we don't.
pass it here.
All right,
Actually, you could probably still take them and still pass.
I think the Huck Finn thing, I think you're pretty familiar with that. Heart of Darkness, we've already been through that. We'll come back to the Victorians. We did Red Badge, the themes of South Italy. Let me give you some.
Hey, guess what, mister?
I've never seen a window.
What?
I've never seen a worse slope there.
David, this, you want one back?
Yes.
Is that what I
Oh,
heard?
you're pretty harsh.
Is that what I heard?
Building better.
Eva. Don't pass that back.
Have sound. Sour Patch. Ben, smell right here. It smells like Sour Patch. It smells like Sour Patch. Right there. No, I swear. No, I actually swear. No, Ben, it's literally Sour Patch. Oh, what? Where? Dude, it's literally.
I'm about to smell
So
it.
we're not done, guys.
I'm about to smell it. I'm just putting the computer up.
Not yet.
Oh, it's-
I wanna read this to you, so take a minute.
He said not put it up yet.
You can put it up later.
Hey, guys, take a look at this. This is in the context of Victorian period and imperialism. Ulysses was the guy from, the Odyssey and the Iliad, particularly the Odyssey. He liked to travel, he was king of Ithaca. I'm gonna read it because it's got these two holes in it, inappropriate places. And what this, the main question, and there are questions that'll help us with it, but the main question is, how does this represent the Victorian period? So let me read it to you, it's by Tennyson. It's also another example of how he writes. And little prophet said an idle king, by this still hearth, and among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and know unequal laws unto a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed, and know not me. So first of all, you should know that it's we call it a dramatic monologue. The character is the speaker. He's the speaker and the main character are the same thing. Let me keep reading. First of all, he's complaining, notice that. I cannot rest from travel, I will drink life to the leagues. At times, I have enjoyed, at times I've enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that love me and alone, on shore, and went through the scudding drifts, the rainy Hyades, vexed the dim sea. I am become a name, for always roaming with a hungry heart. I have seen and known cities of men and manners, comets, councils, and governments. Myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk the light of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am part of all I have met, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and ever when I lose. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in youth. As though to breathe were life, life piled on life, for all too little. And of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. And vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself, and this gray spirit, yearning and desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. Look at the questions on the back. We're not done, but we just have enough time. All right, look at number 2. I want you to write the answer down.
Kenyon.
All right, number 2, how does Ulysses describe his life now in the storm? Did you figure that out? He's tired, he's bored with that life,
He's done.
and he's ready for something new. He's an old man, and he's ready for something new. Then he looks back, look number 3, what does he mean when he says, I am part of all I have met? He looks back and remember he was the guy that went to Troy. He's the guy that took 10 years to sail home, and he visited all these interesting places. He says, I am a part of all I have met. What does he mean by that? Like if you've traveled a lot,
You always get influence
yeah,
from experiences.
very good.
Changes you.
All those places he visited on his journey and back changed him. It became part of who he was. And he wants to, and look at number 4, he says, what's his complaint? He's bored. He's not happy with his wife. He's not happy with the people that he's a king, so he has to govern. He's not happy with those people. He's just tired of doing this. He's ready for something new. And at the end of the first stanza, which is where we stop, and we'll have to stop here in a minute, what does he yearn for? He wants to do it again. He wants to travel again. He wants to learn again. He wants to have adventures again. He doesn't want to live here anymore. And so we'll pick it up tomorrow at 6, because this will be something in your head.
Hey, can you please go put my computer up?